Hello and welcome to the Larger Unnecessary First Player Token podcast. This is episode 68. My name is Chris.
I'm Euan. I'm David.
And welcome back, lads.
Aye.
Does anybody remember how to do this?
No. I was just exasperated myself there. I couldn't really work out what we were doing here.
Oh yeah, I've got to say
What
my
is
name. Aye, so we've got a bit of an explanation to make here, right? Basically, we've had a bit of a problem, a massive problem really, just getting us all in the same room, not just to do the podcasting, but to like play board games and all that sort of thing. It's just it's become a logistical nightmare, and it's going to be the same going through December pretty much, because I'm going to be definitely busier at work. I'm going to be working stupid hours and stuff like that. You and I think you're probably your work kind of pick up a bit.
No, I'm doing sod all over Christmas.
Sod all?
I've got 3 weeks of very easy living.
Fair enough.
I'm going to eat cheese.
Pawel's just back from Japan and now he's going to Brussels. That's why he's not here. So he's not here for this episode. So
does he like to come back from far off places and then just underwhelm himself a little bit just to get sorted out? Right?
It just makes his holiday seem that much better if he just goes somewhere pretty dull.
Makes the memories stand out though.
So yeah, we think that probably the next few episodes are going to be all over the place. We don't know when we're going to release them. It's going to be as and when. So basically, when we can get together and record an episode, I'll stick it out. Hopefully we'll have another video games episode coming very soon. Possibly later this week, but we'll see how we get on with it. But yeah, that's why this board games episode has been delayed. I mean, it's not just been logistical stuff, there's been other stuff going on as well, but I mean, that's kind of personal stuff, and we're not going to go into detail about that. But yeah, we'll keep churning away, and then after the new year, hopefully, we'll get things sorted out, and we'll be able to start releasing episodes a bit more, back to your regular every week.
I actually have a bit of time to play some games and whatnot.
Once everything calms down from the holiday season.
Yes.
Aye, well, maybe actually get together and play some games for a change.
And I'll do a review of our annual Trivial Pursuit session with my mum and dad.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. I'll report back on that in the new year.
Have you? I think you may have mentioned this last year as well, because I'm pretty sure I asked the question, which edition is it that you're playing?
Well, it is the classic 80s Genius edition.
Oh yeah,
the Genus edition.
The Genus edition. Yeah, my dad's got that.
Yeah. Oh, you can't chuck that out.
Oh yeah.
We do have newer versions, but they tend to get...
what are all the Olympic records in the 1980s?
I don't know. I dread the orange coming up in that. I mean, I'm bad enough at sports trivia as it is, but it's like the sports trivia from a Trivial Pursuit game is just... It's another level.
Especially one for the 80s, though.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to get asked some really obscure questions in that are just not relevant anymore.
No, I mean, who even remembers Olympic facts?
Aye. They'll probably ask you a question about Meadowbank Thistle.
Oh, that'd be great. Right. Just for the mention alone.
Okay, so yes, this is a board gaming episode, the tabletop episode, the board gaming episode, whatever you want to call it. So yes, we did manage a couple of weeks ago to get together, despite what we've said, and we played a couple of games, a couple of pretty fun things. First up, we're going to talk about something which is a Kickstarter acquisition, another one of mine, which came through. Well, it's quite recent actually. We played it pretty much as soon as it turned up. We pretty much played it, didn't we? And this is by a company called Academy Games, and I also backed one of their other Kickstarters, and we talked about that game, Mare Nostrum.
Oh yeah.
Which was a lot of fun. And there seems to be a theme with this company, because this is another sort of similar historical themed sort of war game kind of area control thing. So this is 878 Vikings, or as Euan likes to call it.
That's 878 Vikings.
878 Vikings.
There's no distinction really there on the
well,
box.
it doesn't say 878 AD or anything, so you could be right. Maybe they are talking about the 878 exact amount of Vikings that came to the British shores.
That's all they needed. I guess maybe possibly the wee dot symbolises something.
I think that's just a fancy space.
Aye. But
There is a little dot between 878 and Vikings on the box. But
that's the thing, if you were writing if you were going on about 878 Vikings, you probably wouldn't stick a dot in between. So
well,
maybe my theory's
So
wrong.
not, if you put a 1 at the front, it would be like a phone number in the States.
1878 Vikings.
Yeah, for hot
Is
Viking
that,
chat.
is that the Minnesota Vikings hotline? Okay, so this game is based around the Viking invasion of the British Isles. So actually, yeah, the full title of the game is 878 Vikings, Invasions of England. Mm-hmm. And what happens in this game is that you actually play in 2 teams of 2. That's the way that the game's been designed. It's been designed to be played in two teams of 2. You can play it with less people, but you wouldn't. And what happens in this is that each player on each side has a different sort of faction that they play as. So there's 2 English factions and there's 2 Viking factions. The English factions are the Housecarls and the Thanes, and the Viking factions are the
Berserkers.
Berserkers and the
Were they just Vikings?
Norsemen.
Norsemen.
Yeah, they're just the Norsemen.
Just your classic Norsemen.
Yeah.
And the Vikings are, I mean, it's an area control game. So basically, what's going on here is that it's a map of England that's been split into different regions, and it's all about just kind of controlling these regions. And you know, the game ends at a certain point. There are different ways, slightly convoluted ways of ending the game and deciding who wins at that point. But it's all really to do with controlling cities. And, you know, if the Vikings control a certain number of cities at a certain time, then they'll win the game. But if the English have got, you know, a certain number of cities at that time, then they win the game instead. And that's that's the sort of main overview of the game. But the mechanics of it are what make the game interesting, because it's kind of, the 2 sides are kind of forced to do different things. So the English are kind of under siege from the beginning, because the Vikings just turn up, and you know you set up this board and there's not a single Viking on this board. It's just set up with a whole bunch of English units in different cities and regions across England, and then the Vikings turn up with a massive horde. Now, Dave, you were one of your Viking players, so talk us through that.
Yeah, well, when the game starts, you have a kind of a big decision to make as to where you're going to land your horde. You have to land on the coastline because we're coming overseas, and you have to decide where you're going to land and which part of the British Isles you're going to attempt to ravage and take over. So you place your leader, because every horde has a leader character. So you place a marker for him, and then you move him across the board. Now the way you move in this is by playing one of your cards from your hand of 4. Was it? I believe.
Yes.
So in your you have a number of cards that are drawn from a deck, and some of them will have a kind of move value on them. It's like the number of armies that you're allowed to move and how many regions, how many spaces they can move in.
Shires, I believe they're called.
I think Shires is the term in this.
The Shires.
So you place your leader, move him across the board, and if he encounters resistance in the form of the English units, the Housecarls and the other dudes,
The Thanes.
thank you, then a battle ensues. The way that works is by dice rolling, interestingly.
Yep. And it's quite a simple mechanic as well.
It is. It's based on the number of units of each type that each side has in that conflict. There's a limit to how many. Well, you roll a certain number of dice.
It works in the Risk sort of way, where it's, you know, you can have tons of units, but you've a maximum. I think it's 3 for the Thanes. They're different for different factions.
It's interesting the way that works out, because in the English side, the Housecarls are stronger. So, and what that means is that their dice have more hits on them, I believe. But the Thanes get more dice. And it's the same with the Vikings, I think, and the Berserkers are stronger. Is that right?
The Berserkers have more hits, but you only get 2 of those.
Yeah, you only get maximum 2 dice.
Whereas the Norsemen have fewer hits on their dice. But you can roll 3 of them. So in total, the Norsemen, the most you can roll is 5.
For the Vikings.
For the Vikings, I beg your pardon. However, for the English if they are defending a city, they are able to summon the
peasants, really.
the Fyrds, I
Aye.
believe they're called. Yeah, so they can summon a kind of militia to assist them. And that you do that by drawing a card from a deck, and it gives you a variable number.
Yeah.
It can be quite a few, but
Between 2 and 5, I think. all
Yeah, I
of
think
them.
it's 2 and
I don't
5
think there's
is
any
the-
ones in there.
yeah. So that can give you up to 3 additional yellow dice to roll for the Fyrds. However, these dice are not as strong as the.
They're nowhere near.
No,
Most of them
You
just
tend to
run away.
find that, you tend to find that they just run away. But it can give you an edge in these fights against the Vikings.
Oh yeah, well there were certain battles that took place where they did most of the hits.
Yeah,
From what I remember.
Oh yeah, they can make the difference, and they are a major strength that the English side have, in that they can be more powerful on the defence when they're defending a city. The Vikings do not get that advantage. So it affects the way you play as well. There's a tendency when you're playing the English to try and be more defensive if you can. It's not always possible, but there's certainly the motivation there to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you resolve. I mean, I can't remember who goes first. Is it the defenders roll first?
The defenders roll their dice first,
Yeah.
yes. So the defenders have a chance to whittle down the forces before they attack.
Yeah. So you roll the dice in your pool, and the sides that can come up are hits. But in addition to that, you can have flee.
Yep.
If you roll any of those, then
Well, for
units have to flee to the fled area.
The retreat box.
The sea circle.
Although if the villagers, if they flee, they don't go to the retreat box. They just
They just naff
They just
off.
bugger off, aye.
back into their
They're like,
houses,
"Fuck this."
bolt the door. And you can also have command. Is it called? What was it?
Yes, it has a strange name. In fact, I have a look in that rule book there.
Oh, have a
but it's essentially a tactical retreat almost.
Yeah.
So you don't have to use it. You don't score any hits with it. But what you can do is that you can move units from the shire that the battle's taking place in, and you can move them to an adjacent shire as long as you have units in that shire. And it is an interesting thing. I actually think that's one of the most interesting things about the battles, because what you can do is that you can move guys from a fight that you're losing into a fight that's about to start.
Yeah.
That you might have be, looking like you were going to lose, but now you've pumped up that force, so now it could be a 50-50 fight instead. So yeah, I think that's one of the more interesting things with the dice rolling.
Yeah, it can change quite a lot of stuff, because obviously with the retreats, your Thane and Housecarl units are going to go into the wee retreat box, and then they can come out, and you can, in your next turn, you would, like, if you're the Thane, you'll get all your retreated Thane units back. So I found I was rolling quite a lot of them, so it was actually keeping a lot of forces back for later that you could then use sort of tactically if you needed to, actually take a city back. Then that was quite useful. You could throw in a load of guys. It really sort of altered how you sort of approached doing the battles.
Yeah, they're both quite interesting mechanics, I would say. Both of them. They're the retreat one for the reason you're saying. And the command one's quite unusual.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've seen similar things in games like that, but I think it works really well in this game in particular.
It does, although it's infuriating when you roll a bunch of them. When
you're going for it.
When you really need to win this fight,
or when you can't use them.
Aye,
because that's the thing with them. They're not hits, and hits are pretty useful.
That's
they're the most useful. Generally,
they're what win you the fight, or lack of them can lose a fight that you should have won, because after you've rolled whoever's attacking or defending, when you roll your dice, so you allocate hits.
yes.
Which basically means removing the opposing side have to remove units from their force. And
if you lose units, you decide which ones you lose.
yeah. Although the Vikings have to remove one berserker initially. The first one they remove has to be a berserker to kind of represent that they're charging ferociously into battle with no heed for self-preservation. Yeah. So you remove the units, you resolve the retreats and the commands if you wish to, and then if there are units left, or if both sides still have units left, then the battle continues. So whoever's turn it is, they roll their dice and you resolve as before until one of the sides has no units present in that location, either through having them killed or retreated or commanded away, tactically retreated.
And what's another thing that's kind of interesting with the dice roll is because we were talking earlier about like the Thanes have their own number of dice and the Housecarls have their own, the same with the Vikings, they have the Berserkers and the Norsemen with their own dice. If you roll a command thing on the dice or a retreat on the dice on, let's say, the Thanes dice, it has to be a Thane unit that does that thing. So if the Thanes roll some dice, they roll a bunch of retreats, they can't retreat the Housecarls. It has to be Thanes that they retreat. That leads to some sort of interesting situations as well, because in fact it leads to some annoying situations if you're sitting there going, perfect, I can move this Housecarl into this other region with this command thing. Oh no, I can't because it's a Thane die, so this Housecarl's just going to have to stay here and die. Like,
the sort of two factions on each side is quite an interesting thing in this game. It definitely makes it a bit brighter than it would have been if it was just simply
one-on-one.
One faction in each, yeah, for sure. Because it affects your movement as well. When your turn comes around as a player, you can only move an army that contains units of your faction. And so that can lead to some issues. And so that also leads... What you tend to want to do is make sure you've got units of both factions in each army. And you might use your commands and your reinforcements coming back in from having retreated earlier in order to maintain that during the game. So it's another little tactical consideration.
Yeah, I mean, we found that earlier, sort of later in that game that we played, that we were struggling to get Housecarl units out, and there were certain places where they would reinforce, certain places where they wouldn't. We had quite a lot of Thane units out and a lot of armies, but we couldn't get the command to move them because we were lacking, because they weren't as mixed. Every time it came around to you had less options as a Housecarl of like where to, what armies
I had less
move.
units, aye.
Yeah, and that really kind of screwed us over at the end a wee bit.
Aye. So what we should say is that, like, because I mean we've given a good overview of how the battle system and stuff works. Now this map of England it's actually, there's a lot of shires in it. Like, it's not like there's just 6 or 7. I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't want to count them. There's probably about 30 or something like that. And the cities are kind of spread out across them. It's not like each shire has a city in them. How many cities is there? Maybe about 10, something like that. Or no, is there 14? I think it's 14.
Yeah, because that's
I think that's what the thing goes up to. And some of these cities are reinforcing cities. So at the start of each English player's turn, they'll get to put these reinforcements in there. And the whole purpose, like for the Vikings, is really to take these cities. But there are non-reinforcing cities as well. But like the Vikings will score their points, sort of thing, or whatever you want to call them. They getting towards that target of the number of cities that they want to capture just by capturing any city. But if they take the reinforcing cities, we can't reinforce there anymore. And that became a massive problem for us because we lost the entirety of the south of England at one point. Like, towards the end of the game, the south of England was gone.
Yeah.
We were just, like, trying to reinforce from York and Manchester or something like that, wasn't it? It was just something like...
It was a real struggle.
We had nothing left, really, and it was becoming a struggle. We did put up a good fight at the end.
I think it was
because I think the game is kind of set up assuming that that's the kind of thing that's going to happen, because there is a point where a certain turn, Alfred the Great turns up for the English, and he's the only leader that the English get, whereas the Vikings have, I think, is it 7 leaders in total?
They can do. I mean, you can lose them if they're sort of entirely defeated in battle. But, each time, because every 2 turns that the Vikings take, another horde will appear, and most of them are led by new leader characters.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And Alfred the Great turns up and he brings a big army with him, basically. And I think, he turns up at exactly the right point, I think, because we were starting to get spread a bit thin. I mean, I'm saying this after one play, but he turned up at exactly the right point for us, where it basically came down to one big fight at the end between Alfred and the Viking army that we had kind of managed to wear down. Because like it's an interesting thing playing as the English in this, because you know the Vikings are coming into England and they are trying to take as many cities as they can, but also defend them at that point.
Yeah.
So they then become defenders, and you know when they are bringing their leaders in and they're rampaging through, they've got a massive team, and they want to push as hard as they can through England and take as many of these cities as possible, especially on the first turn, because you have to like one of the things in this game is that if at the end of any round the Vikings have no cities under their control, they automatically lose the game. So in the very first turn of the game, the Vikings always take the very first turn. They have to take a number of cities in that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if they don't, like, if they somehow manage to fuck it up with this massive host that they've got, they're screwed. They're really putting themselves in the back foot, and you could technically lose the game in the first round.
Yeah, it's quite possible.
Aye.
Yeah.
But yeah, so playing as the English is really interesting because there's almost like a sort of back and forth. Where the English are totally at the start of the game, they don't have a lot of units on the board, and then you find as the sort of couple of rounds go through and the Vikings have taken more cities, the English have really built up a force at that point using like some of these reinforcements. Like Dave, one of the things that you and James noticed as we were playing is that you really needed to take out that southwest part of England because we were just pushing reinforcements in from there constantly, and we were like really hammering back at that point, and I just felt like I found all that just like that was really fun and really interesting part of the game.
Seeing Dave and Ian were worried about the threat from Cornwall.
Yeah, yeah, Dave and James.
Oh, sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, I've actually found that slightly curious, is because it goes against the way it happened historically, but the way that, and like you get as well as movement cards in your hand, you have a number of other special cards that allow you to do special things. You can, you know, give you an advantage in battle, or and they're asymmetrical, so the Vikings get a different set of cards from the English, and so a lot of the cards that are in the Viking deck are focused around the north. All right. Yes, we didn't play a great deal of them as it happened. We weren't able to, but there's ones that let you move units up in anywhere. They can land anywhere that's adjoined to the North Sea, so you can do like surprise attacks, and you have a couple of those. And there's other ones in there that give you advantages in the north of England, and I think that's meant to sort of reflect history in a certain way. However, when we played the game, immediately James and I, we looked at the board, and it was very clear to us, at least, that you had to go for the south of England. And it was really tempting because I wanted to go like, let's go to York first because, you know, Jorvik and all that, and go down. But I was like, those reinforcements. So we pushed ourselves really thin. Like we took massive, like we weren't afraid of taking huge casualties in order to prevent you having one turn of reinforcements. So we ended up pretty much occupying the south of England.
It certainly worked out for you.
We did rampage all the way across to Cornwall at one point.
Well, I think
it's curious.
I think one of the things is because if I'm remembering the board correctly, the north of England has a lot of little shires in it.
Yeah,
which are hard, and it takes longer to move through that. Whereas the south of England had bigger shires, which you could get from one side of the country to the other quite quickly. So I think it was kind of pushing you in that direction of like there's a bunch of cities that are easy to take.
It would be interesting to play it again and just try it differently, because if we had gone to the north, we wouldn't have taken as many casualties. We could have set ourselves up again in a kind of defensive position. It is strange how much you defend as the Vikings in this, because it's better to be defending as the Vikings than it is to be assaulting, because even though the Vikings don't get a defensive bonus,
you don't have to fight the peasants.
Yeah,
but it's interesting. I think both sides have this kind of one part of the mechanic that kind of mitigates the other in some way, where it almost like balances them out to some extent. Where if for some reason you're always going to be better at defending if you're like the English side.
I think one of the things, like Dave was talking about, the tactics cards that you can play, because generally you only get the peasants as a defensive thing, but I think one of the sort of turning points of the game for us, where it looked like we were going to do quite well, was when I played, I think it was a card called Alfred's Gambit or something, where basically if you attacked you brought peasants with you,
Oh, right.
And that kind of, because that put the numbers in our favour for a couple of fights that turn, which we ended up, really whittling down the Viking forces in there. I think it didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to, but we totally just annihilated a whole bunch of guys. We could have done better with it, I think, but it's just, it's a dice rolling game, so you just have to take what happens. There's one question that I was thinking about when we were playing this game, because these kind of games are not something that I would usually buy. All right, and the thing that really attracted me with it was like the whole Vikings theme. I've not got any games that have got Viking themes in them. The whole idea, actually, because when I was looking at this in Kickstarter and I was looking at it, I thought, like, playing either side in this, it's you're kind of playing with the same rules, but it's a completely different game because the English are under siege, whereas the Vikings are totally pushing through. But is this would you say that this is more of a war game or an area control thing?
No, it's definitely an area control game because of the large amount of randomness. You couldn't classify this as a war game. Like a war simulation, but aye. Yeah, but war gamers would say this is nothing like a war game. It's, it's just like sort of fancy, more interesting Risk. And it's because there's a lot of randomness in it. And I think it's certain people won't get on with that. Yeah. Because we've talked about the dice, and they can go, the last turn, I don't know if you remember the sort of climactic battle, the Norsemen, the Vikings nearly lost what looked like a dead cert. Oh, because I just kept rolling the stupid command things just again and again, but we just eked it out. It was like, down to the last couple of guys. But it's not just that. There's a number of other elements. The random turn order.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Aye, the random turn order is a very interesting thing in the game.
Yeah. There's 4 coloured cubes.
Yeah, one representing each of the
faction.
4 factions. That's the thing about it. Yeah, it can completely change how a turn, a whole round will go. Because
you can end up you just draw a cube out of the bag. Now the very, very first turn of the game has to be a Norseman turn. It has to be a Viking turn. I think it's always the Norsemen that go first, because the Vikings have to take cities in the first turn, or they end up automatically losing the game, like I said. But after that, it is just random cube draws to see who goes next, and you can end up with if you have the Vikings end one round with having their cubes out last, but then start the next round with their cubes out first, you could end up having the Vikings having 4 turns in a row essentially, and that could be interesting. Same with the English. The English could have 4 turns in a row as well. But it's just it is such a weird thing in a game like this.
Yeah, it's unusual. It's quite exciting.
It's exciting.
I think I have a slight suspicion that because there's no reason why you could not play this game with a fixed turn order. Yeah. And one of the aspects of this game that I quite like is it's very amenable to customization or tweaking. You can vary it to your own preferences. Like a lot of this randomness, apart from the dice, the other aspects you can kind of house rule out, and so you could play with a fixed turn order. I have a slight suspicion that the game will not be as good.
Yeah, I don't think. It's like you say. I don't think it would be anywhere near as exciting.
Yeah, because I think it becomes a bit drier.
I remember where there was points in the game where we were sitting there, like me and you in particular, were sitting sort of talking to each other and saying, right, if we get the next turn, then we should do this. Yeah. But if we don't, we could be screwed. But we just need to wait and see how it pans out and all this. And yeah, you're right, because it does then. It makes your planning harder, but it does make it more exciting. Aye.
Yeah, and this thing about strategic planning being difficult is a wee bit of a theme in this game as well, because the other aspect that's quite random is the hand of cards, and what happens when you draw up your hand and you have no move cards remaining, which is a possibility. You may have a hand of 4 special cards, and if that happens, you have to shuffle them back into the deck and draw 4 more, and keep doing that until you have a hand that contains a move card, so you can move during that turn. And that's fine, but what it does is it kind of removes a bit of the strategic planning element of the game with regards to the special cards, because you can't really, if you've got a special card in your hand, you can't say, I'm going to hang on to this
Yeah.
and use it. Because that happened to us a couple of times where we had some cards that we were like, we can't use it yet, but I'd quite like to plan for that for the future, because some of them do require a wee bit of planning in order to use. Do
you think that's deliberate, though? Do you think that's a deliberate design choice? Like, do you think they're basically saying, use these cards when you get them, don't hang on to them?
I'm not sure, because I have a feeling it's to do with, it's kind of a necessity, because otherwise you can cheat.
Well, true, aye.
I wonder if it's more that, because you have to...
It's one of these things that you could probably house rule, like you say. But
you absolutely could, because if you're playing with people that you trust, then you can house rule so that you get to keep the cards that are in your hand, and the other people will trust you to say, well, look, I'm just going to draw up new cards until I've got a move card, but I'm keeping the ones that I had prior to this. You could come up with some sort of solution for that. And like I say, there's all like I was suggesting you could do other interesting things, like the ability to stack your deck before you started. I think would be quite an interesting variant and give you definitely. Well, I don't know if it would work or not. Also, there's a whole other set of like
there's more cards.
Deck stacking. There's a deck building element as well.
Yeah. So you can pick certain tactics cards to go into your deck rather than you can take some of the normal ones out, because we kind of played it in the beginners mode almost, because you just have a certain bunch of cards that are numbered, and it's not a lot. You only get like 12 cards in your deck or something, isn't it? It's something like that, because you're not playing a lot of rounds. It's 7 rounds maximum, I think. So yeah, you can like customize your deck if you decide that, you know what, I want more of these type of cards and less of that. But there's also, like, when you're talking about sort of customization and changing the game and stuff, there are 2 scenario things in the base game, in the rule book.
Yeah, I was just looking at those earlier on, and
which kind of tweak the rules a bit and give you different outcomes and stuff. So that's a nice thing. But also, this game came with an expansion thing in it, which brings some religious stuff into it. You know, like the pagan gods of the Vikings and the Christianity of the English. And you get more dice that you can roll, and you can use these dice for certain powers and stuff like that. I've not really looked into the rules of that too much, but it's something that will just, you know, put a bit more flavour into the game, a bit of something else. Because I think me and you, Dave, we sort of talked about this after we'd finished playing the game, and we said that, you know what, it's a solid game, but it feels like there could be more that you could do with it.
Yeah.
And I would like to try sort of throwing this expansion and seeing what it does to the game, seeing if it does actually give it a bit more of a twist, a bit more flavour.
It would be good to give that a go, because my feeling was like, if we took away that random turn order and the sort of if the dice were less random, suddenly it's like this is a very dry game now. There's not really, even though there's those wee tactical elements, but it's very tactical and very not strategic. But to me, it's like, you know, you're talking about the scenarios and the add-ons, and you could, if you don't like the way this game is, you could totally make it work the way that you know, if you were more of a war gamer, I think you could, you know, you've got the scenarios, you can do all these other things to kind of tailor it to the way you want to play, and I quite like that about it. It's quite cool. It's not something we would do necessarily, but you know, because otherwise it's not. It's like it's the kind of game that some people are really going to not get on with.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there.
I loved it, but
I really enjoyed it.
On the flip side of that, that's good, because it's offering a kind of a wargaming experience, but it's not too dry. It's kind of fun, and you can play this with people who aren't, you know, because it wasn't super serious, and so you don't have to.
Like, there's a simplicity to like a lot of the just everything that's there. I mean, there's a depth to playing it, but in terms of like what you're having to deal with in playing it, there's not a lot to.
You're not very straightforward, I would say.
Yeah, you're not making like real agonising decisions. No. I mean, especially playing as the Vikings, it's quite.
You just kill everything.
There's not. It's a lot more straightforward playing as the Vikings. Playing as the English, it's harder. I think.
It's more making the best of what you can with the English, kind of just like, because you've got tons of Vikings. You're just trying to sort of whittle them down, so it's, you know, you're not going to win. Like one-on-one battles.
I think this is like, because of that, I think this is probably one of these games that's probably a good introduction to how you should play war games, because it is about picking your fights. Because there were certain things, it's like, you know what, like we made decisions in this game, and we said, you know what, let's lose that city. Let's deliberately lose that city. Let's not reinforce it. Let's move all these guys over there. You know, just making these sort of decisions that are kind of really important when it comes to playing real, like, proper war games and stuff like that. It's like about what do you give up in order to win the war, basically. Right, we're going to have to sort of wrap up here because we've been talking about that for a good half an hour now, believe it or not. So I mean, one of my favourite things about this is the team aspect. Like, I do like sitting scheming with somebody else, rather than feeling like you're making all these agonising decisions yourself. You've got somebody to blame or whatever.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that because there's an element of like counting and looking at the board, which is
total
easy,
Dave.
which is easy to make. It's not even the counting; it's the intersections between the shires.
Yes.
Sometimes you can get that wrong because they're like, they're quite
They're quite uneven.
They're a wee bit uneven, and it's easy to miss it. And it's quite helpful having someone else who go, no, you need three to get there, not two. And you're like, oh yeah. I mean, that happened a lot. It wasn't just me. It went.
It was mostly you, Dave.
I liked having because it's not always a good thing in games for me, but I really enjoyed it in this one.
Yeah. It's a really enjoyable game. Euan?
Yeah, one of my favourites.
Again?
Aye. top two.
Top. How many games are in your top two now?
It's probably about 100.
Okay, anyway, that's 878 Vikings. I think we're all pretty much giving that a good thumbs up at the moment. We'd like to try it with the expansion. See if that changes anything. I'm hoping it makes the game a lot better.
It does weirdly make me want to have a leisurely game of Risk.
We're not doing it.
We're
not doing it.
But it's just kind of like, this you do the thing. But
Okay.
it takes that basic idea and turns
My
it
girlfriend
into
was
something.
playing Monopoly yesterday. I mean,
Who's playing Monopoly?
my girlfriend. No, just don't. I had to give her a telling off.
Aye.
Even if, she said that she won, and I was like, nobody wins.
Nobody
wins in Monopoly.
I've never seen that happen.
Anyway, let's move on. So yeah, that was 878 Vikings, Invasions of England. It's by Academy Games and part of their Birth of Europe series of games, I believe. So there are a few more sort of historical games set in Europe that they've done in this series. Okay, so let's move on to something completely different. So there's a game that I've been trying to get my hands on for a long time, and it was been out of print for ages. There was people selling. There was somebody selling a copy of this on Amazon, I believe, a seller on Amazon that was selling it for something like 350 quid. And I would like to know what this person thought they were up to. Just because the game is out of print, did they think that somebody would seriously spend that much money on this game? But anyway, this is Catacombs, which is recently reprinted, and it's a dexterity game. It's a dungeon crawling dexterity game, so it's got a nice wee twist on it. Yeah. So there's actually some theme going on here. It's not just flicking things about the place, but it is essentially what you're doing. Euan, you were excellent at this game.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
I really get this.
You want to give us a roundup of what Catacombs is?
Well, you just you go through a series of maps. You fight some enemies. You have to flick your little counters at the enemies, and yeah, that's basically it. There's not a lot to it. It's got a nice sort of dungeon crawler theme. You fight skeletons and whatnot. Yeah, and you just generally like fling your guys into posts as best you can.
That's true. That's pretty much what happens.
Yeah.
So in this game, you have a bunch of heroes and you have an overlord. So one player playing as the overlord, and that's always me. So yeah, I was the overlord.
You do love overlord in it.
I'm always the overlord in these games, the evil overlord.
It's because you're the only one that can be bothered to read the rules.
That's very true. So it's kind of strange. So like you say, you set up a little map thing, and there's a bunch of rooms that you'll play through actually as you go through this dungeon. You can have 4 heroes in the campaign, but you think there's a choice of 6 in the base game. But you've got your classic, you've got a barbarian, you've got an elf that's like an archer, you've got a rogue type fighting woman, and you have a wizard who is completely different from the rest of them, kind of. And they're all just little discs, and you set up a board that has all the some obstacles in it, which are essentially just big, thick black discs that are sort of put into recesses in the board. And the Overlord will set some monsters up, depending on which room it is. There's little room cards that tell you, here's what you put in this room. And there's quite a good selection of monsters in this that all have their own sort of little abilities and stuff like that. And yeah, you just have a flick fest. So basically, depending on what your character can do, you can, you might be able to like just move your character a bit, or you can flick your character, and if it hits a monster, that monster takes a wound, and most of the monsters only have one wound, so they're dead. And it's almost like a sort of weird, like 2D pool. If you see what I mean,
like billiards.
Well, yeah, something like that. So it's like you're just kind of jockeying for position and then smacking things about the place, and what makes the game kind of interesting is the fact that like it's not just the case of flick, 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 flick. I hit that's dead. There are lots of different abilities and stuff in this. So you might get little like your archer elf can actually shoot little little arrow discs at things. Some of the monsters do that as well. But then you get things like one of the things that totally ruined you in one of the levels that you played was when I kept on shooting you with stun arrows. And when I shot you with stun arrows, there was only certain things that you could do when you were stunned. And I just kept doing it one after another. And there's all sorts of other things, so you can do like poison shots, like the wizard can throw fireballs around the place by flicking his discs. The wizard also has a shield. So a shield little disc that you can flick at a monster, doesn't do any damage to the monster, but it knocks the monster out of the way. And then you can reposition the shield in front of the wizard so that he can then avoid being hit by the monsters. So it's like a really childish, just tactical flicking game.
Yeah.
And it's stupid fun.
It is a lot of fun. It doesn't necessarily need to take all that long to play. You just sort of rattle through a wee campaign of it. It's just fun. It's you muck about with all the abilities. You get gold for killing stuff, so you can get better equipment and things like that.
Yeah.
I had a nice axe, although I used them both with my.
The barbarian starts the game with those. Yeah.
But yeah, there's other weapons you can pick up and things that are suited better to. We didn't seem to pick up anything randomly that was suited for any of the individual characters.
I think you did, but I think you found like, you played the slot machine thing at one point. There is a weird slot machine mechanic in this game in between. You go to a tavern, you can basically play a slot machine, and you kept winning items that the heroes weren't suited for whatever hero won it, because you can't swap items in this game, which is an interesting thing. But yeah, there's a lot of just really silly things going on. But there's potential for strategy, especially from the Overlord's side, because some of these rooms, like I say, you've just got a sort of deck of room cards, and it's kind of pre-built in a way. It's like it gets harder as you go through, but and yeah, there's like healers and taverns and stuff in between some of the rooms, but there's bits on these cards that tell you like which monsters to put in, but some of them are just kind of open-ended, so they're just kind of like you can put a monster in which is this level or lower basically, so you could really like put whatever monsters that you really like. You could just like, I really like the look of this like Cerberus or whatever it was, the three-headed hound. I'm going to stick that in there. That'll really fucking mess them up. I don't know. I mean, Dave, what were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah.
Because you've been awfully silent.
Well, it's not my favourite.
Stroking your beard.
It's not my favourite game. Put it that way. But yeah, it took a long time. But
probably took longer than it should have.
It took longer than it probably should have. You're right.
It's an odd one. I mean, it is. In theory, it should be like just silly fun, I think. But if you just like flick stuff around at random,
Dave, were you taking it too seriously?
Well, no, but I mean, if you're just like, oh, let's just take a turn, flick stuff at random, then you kind of don't do very well and die, and so you're like, oh well, so you do have to kind of make an effort.
Stuff there.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that helps is it helps if you know how to do cool stuff. Maybe you're the sort of person that can immediately figure that sort of thing out. But there's like little clever combos, and there's ways you can interact with the other players that are very strong. If you can only see, or if you only realise that you can do these things. Like, one of the things is the wizard has this shield thing, which is incredibly useful. I mean, it's useful for shielding the wizard, that's obvious, but its true utility goes way beyond that. But you have to kind of realise that.
Yeah.
Like, we played for ages before Chris pointed out to me that, you can use the shield to move the wizard.
Yeah, you can put the shield behind the wizard and knock the wizard forward.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, well, that's actually really freaking useful. But that had never occurred to me. I was using it to move other things, but never used it to move myself. And just little things like that. Some of the stuff is kind of non-obvious, but like once you get it, you're like, oh yeah, I can do all these cool things, and then it becomes more fun. It's almost like you need like a little a wee tutorial.
Yeah,
like a little like. I mean, I'm sure if I watched a video of people playing this, they'd be doing all sorts of stuff that we didn't do, and I'd be like, oh wow, we could have. Why did we not do that? Why did? So there is that aspect to it. I mean, it's definitely more fun once you figure out the cool stuff. If you're just like, oh, I'll just move. Oh, I missed. Right, my turn's over. It's it's not quite.
I suppose.
Because it also helps if you're good at it. Like,
well, yeah, because I mean, once you start setting up stuff like that, you've got to rely on 3 or 4 hits in a row, having actually connecting and doing the things that you want them to do.
Yeah, because it is like playing pool. One of the things with playing pool or any of these games, pool's a great game.
Yeah.
When you can play it.
Yeah.
If you're shit at pool, it's the worst experience.
Yeah.
Like, people are like, do you want to play pool? And you're like, no, I'm shit at it. And they're like, go on, how shit could you be? And I'm like, well,
I'm this
watch.
shit.
and then you play a game and they're like, well, that was terrible. Like, oh yeah, I told you, you have to practice a little bit. So,
you suck the fun out of this, Dave.
Making us think about pool, crap pool like that.
There is this undeniable aspect that is like, it's way more fun when you're a wee bit. You don't have to be amazing at it, but you need a bit of ability at it.
Yeah.
So that definitely helps as well. I don't know. I think it'd be interesting. I think it would work really well as a party game with the full complement.
Yeah, 4 people.
5
people.
5 players. Yeah, because the Overlord or whatever he's called, you could kind of games master it a bit in that you're not necessarily playing to win so much as playing to
make it interesting,
make it fun for other people. And because you'd be the one who knows the game, you would be in the sort of position to do that, and then it could be a bit of a laugh.
Yeah, I wasn't doing that.
No, but then we were playing on easy mode, so
yeah, we did kind of play the tutorial.
Yeah, and like that put a massive. That's a massive advantage for the adventurers.
Yes,
like we had.
You start the game with gold and all this sort of stuff.
We had so much gold, it was
yeah.
ridiculous. That slot machine thing.
We spent
so much money on it.
Yeah, that wouldn't normally happen. We did spend a good 20 minutes just running through the slot machines. That's not normally how it goes. Yeah. So I'm sure it would be better played on the normal mode.
Most of the items as well. I mean, and it's probably a good thing that they don't go too complicated with like, oh, you can do all this stuff to your character and like improve your character in all these ways, because essentially it's just down to the.
There's no like leveling of your characters or anything. It's just a case of you can buy items for them.
A couple of little things that give it a bit of flavour, make it a bit more fun.
Yeah.
Nothing that's going to get you too.
I mean, it is all about flavour. I mean, there are stuff like, there are items that are better for certain characters, and like there's nothing stopping a barbarian from using this rogue's knife, but if the rogue uses it, the rogue gets an extra attack or something like that. I think dare I say it, I think it's really interesting for the Overlord, like really fun for the Overlord to play. I was really enjoying some of that stuff, especially like because the Overlord has quite a bit of space to set his monsters up in, compared to the heroes who always start in this behind this very thin line.
Yeah.
So they're always just kind of lined up at the back. Whereas the Overlord, I was deliberately positioning my monsters behind pillars and stuff like that you couldn't get to, but these were the monsters that were shooting you with stun arrows. And because there's a certain amount of space that you can move the arrow out from the token that represents the monster, I could just basically sit behind a pillar and shoot round it constantly, and it was really fucking annoying. That's what I mean. I wasn't playing I probably could have played to make the game more interesting, but then there were certain points where I just made a skeleton charge you for a laugh, or deliberately put him in the way of something. Just he's defending that, he's going to die, but now he's defending this much better monster. I felt like as the Overlord, I could play really tactically using my monsters.
Yeah.
For the heroes, it's like you've got this one hero that represents your guy. If that hero dies, you're screwed. So I think you were a bit more reluctant to actually put these heroes into danger.
Yeah, I think we could have been more aggressive at the start of the game, which would have just sort of moved it along a bit more quickly.
Well, I always tried to chuck the barbarian in as...
you did do that.
But then I generally never got him across quick enough.
Yeah, because you have to coordinate. This is the other thing. You do have... It's like, it's a light-hearted game.
Yeah.
And the turn order is entirely flexible. You can take your turn whenever you want on the hero side.
Yeah.
But, you've got 4 heroes, but there's no fixed turn order for them. So, I mean, that's great. Like, you're like, oh yeah, well, I'm just going to take my turn. And quite often... quite often what ended up happening is we sort of like got bogged down in discussion about what we should do. And sometimes I was like, right, I'm just going to take my turn because it'll be easier. It's like I'm just going to go. It's like we'll see what happens. It's a weird kind of dichotomy between what seems like should be really light-hearted, and it is, but like if you don't work together, you don't. It's not just that you lose. It's like less fun as well.
Yeah. Because, totally.
Like your barbarian can charge up on his own, but like really it needs to be coordinated with the other characters.
Yeah.
In order for
I do
it to
remember
work properly.
there was quite a few points where one of you had put a hero directly in the path of another hero, which made that hero then useless.
Yeah.
So like, you're right, Dave. You do have to coordinate. You do have to make sure that you aren't putting yourselves in each other's way and stuff like that, because some of those spaces get a bit cramped when you've got all these pillars lying about the place, and
you get stuck in the middle of
there's monsters and heroes everywhere and familiars and shields, and the board does get a bit. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about was that, and there are expansions for this game, so I don't know what those add because I haven't actually looked into it. But one of the things I was thinking was, I think this game would benefit from a bigger board.
Yeah.
Like wider.
I thought that as well, playing it as
because it's quite a narrow board. It's a reasonable length, I would say, but I think if you could make it a sort of square rather than a rectangle, and you could get a couple more monsters in there and stuff like that, and I don't know. I just feel like the board probably could be bigger. I don't know if this was maybe a design choice, if they maybe just they tried it and it didn't work, or there was too much space at that point. It is maybe just to try and force you into engaging with each other.
Yeah, I mean, it may be that it's less fun because when it's more open like that. I don't know. I mean, to me, it comes down to once you know how to play it, and I don't mean the mechanics of the rules, although there are a few fiddly bits and pieces in there.
There are.
There's that too. It's like once you get it, then I think it's more fun. Like I had the wizard character, and it took me ages to figure out how to play him properly because he can't move and fire. He can't move and like launch a fireball. He has to stay still in order to launch a fireball. And for some reason, it took me ages to kind of
that was really confusing
really notice that. So in the end, I used very few of his spells because he was always stuck up at the back.
Yeah.
I could never quite get him to where he needed to be in order to do the things I wanted him to do. And I think it's just like experience. Once you know how to do it, then
I think it's true what you said earlier. You should really just be chucking those heroes in.
It could
they're going to get hurt.
See if you can flip them over the pillars.
Trick shots.
Oh yeah.
But you mean you can't do trick shots in this because you could. There's nothing stopping you from firing an arrow off a pillar and into a monster or a hero or something like that. There's nothing stopping you from doing that, and you can hit multiple targets in one flick as well. You can bounce off at one target and hit another, and it'll damage them both. So there are opportunities for doing fancy little trick shots and stuff like that, and I think that's what the game kind of is all about. It's kind of setting up those sort of silly moments where you do stupid shit like that, where it's like, I'm going to fire this arrow off that pillar. Oh fuck, it worked! That's it's those daft little things.
Yeah, you definitely wouldn't want to play this game with the sort of person who takes these things a little bit too seriously.
Yeah, Dave, you're not playing again.
Because it does rely on, like, you have to know like what hits what, and sometimes it's very, very difficult to see.
Yes,
and you
yes.
kind of just have to, like, you know, like these people used to play 40k with, where you'd have massive arguments about, like, we were talking about units being in cover or not, where they just take it way, way too seriously, and they're like, oh, you nudged that unit, or things like that.
Yeah.
You couldn't play with people who were like that, because sometimes you just have to go, you know,
You just
this is
you
what
do.
happened.
Yeah, look, it's a stupid game. You just can't. You don't take it seriously. Yes, there's tactics in it. Yes, you don't want your hero to die, all that sort of stuff. But it's a silly game. It's just about flicking things around at the end of the day. And you shouldn't take it seriously. And yeah, when it does come to things like that, did that hit that guy or did it not? Yeah, you can sit and argue about it as long as you're having fun. You know. I'm pretty sure me and Euan had an argument like that during the game.
Well, yeah, there's a few times where you would see stuff hit things like, and it might look like or not look like it had hit two characters, but at that point it is entirely down to your own observational skills. It's like there's no objective, like rule-based way of sorting that out. So you you have to let go a little bit there.
You do. Right, anyway, we need to wrap that up now as well. So yeah, Catacombs, it is fun. It's like I say, don't take it seriously, just enjoy it. It's
Just
a silly little
remember
flicking
Subutio.
game with fantasy heroes and skeletons and orcs and trolls and, you know, big bad villains that have shitloads of hit points and stuff like that. Yeah, I had a good time with it. I think it is maybe a wee bit long, but that could just be us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be keen to play it again with 5 players. Just when we've got a wee bit of time, and just have a bit of a laugh with it and see what happens.
I mean, I suppose there's nothing stopping you as well with this customizability element of just having a single, you know, one-off one-off skirmish sort of thing.
Just playing a couple of rooms and then just that's it. You're done. But
choosing what you put into it and
do what you want with it, really. Just little wooden discs.
Who's stopping you?
That's it. Who's stopping us? Okay, so that's Catacombs. That's by Elzra. And it has all sorts of, like, you know, all these other podcasts, you know, those other, like, gaming podcasts, they've all given it, like, seals of approval and stuff like that.
What?
But they've never asked us.
Oh,
I mean, I can't
well,
believe
why
it.
don't we just go around stamping board game boxes? We're going to Waterstones and start, like, printing it.
Anyway, right, okay, we need to wrap up there. So we'll give out all our internet stuff. So our email address is firstplayertoken@gmail.com. That's FIRST. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube. We have a PSN community. Those are all the large and unnecessary First Player Token, or just First Player Token. Twitter is @1STPlayerToken.
It's once the player token.
Thank you, Euan. We have a Discord. You need to go to discord.me/firstplayertoken, again FIRST, if you want to join us there and get some chat on the go. My Twitch username is Unnecessary Chris. I am still streaming video games. Been playing a lot of... I've been doing some retro stuff. I finished Shadowrun. I've moved on to Ultima Underworld, so... excellent stuff. That's mostly Tuesday nights I do the retro stuff. And we are part of the Podnose Network,
UK's leading entertainment podcast network. Sorry, my throat is absolutely dying.
George will be disappointed.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I've shot all over your Podnose introduction there.
Okay, so yeah, go to podnose.com if you want to check out a whole bunch of podcasts that are on there. I'm sure they're all excellent like us. We will be back in hopefully a few days' time. If not, it'll be next week, but we'll get another episode out to you within the next week. It'll be a video games one, but until then, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.